YouTube fam, it's Emma. I wanted to actually give you guys a little bit of a bonus video. So this is something I've been working on for the past few years, and it is the drop back and the stand up into Urdhva Dhanurasana or upward facing bow. Some styles of yoga call this wheel pose. This is very, very tricky, and I was working on this for many years before I can confidently say that I can do it. I did have 2 teachers help me with this in person, so I think that can be very, very valuable if you have a teacher that you respect and you think is very knowledgeable that can help you in person and you trust them. I thought that was really pivotal to learning this pose, as someone who can physically help you stand up. For me, the drop back was a little bit easier than the stand up. I think most of what was getting in my way was like the fear of falling backwards. I think that is accurate also when we're learning things like arm balances, like crow pose. A lot of times I know students can do it, but the fear of falling on your face is keeping you from doing it. So you might have the strength, but I totally understand. It is a bit scary to me, especially the stand up. Now, I would do this at the end of a practice, one that was probably focused on back bends, or at least where we've already done 3 solid back bends. So at least a bridge and maybe 2 other upward facing bows, because I don't want to just drop back into this shape. So if you haven't done that already, I would definitely warm up your spine, maybe do a full practice and then check this out, or at least do some twists, some cat-cows, and then definitely a few deep back bends. Now, there are a few drills I would highly recommend before learning how to drop back from standing. So first I would start in more of a camel setup on my knees. From here, I want to bring my arms forward. Now, I don't want to arch my back here, so no butt sticking out. I want to scoop my tailbone, like my tailbone scooping towards the back of my knees. I always cue this in bridge pose as well. So I want to keep a line from my knees through my hips to my shoulders. I'm not trying to back bend into camel pose here. What I'm trying to do is to lower myself back, keeping that flat line, and then pulling myself forward. So I'm really using my quads and my glutes to control this movement so I don't fall backwards or take this into a back bend. So again, I'm gonna lean back, everything stays straight, and then pull it forward. This is really gonna help to strengthen your quadriceps and your hip flexors as well. Lean back and hips forward. This time I'm gonna have you lean back, place your hands on your heels, and then take this to camel pose. Push the hips forward, open your chest, spread your collarbones apart. Drop your head back. And if camel pose is not quite there for you, that's totally fine, but I would not move on to drop backs if you're still working on camel pose, or even if you're still working on upward facing bow. You should have a solid foundation for that pose first. Begin to make your way out of this, and we'll counter this with a cat pose. Hands to the ground and round your back. So for me, the drop back was a little bit easier. I think we'll start there. I like to set my feet up wider than I would for Urdhva Dhanurasana. In Urdhva Dhanurasana, we want the feet at hip width with the toes pointing forward. However, if you were a beginner coming to yoga, it would be a lot easier to take your toes out. So when I see beginners in class, that's usually what we do, is the toes out. So I always cue the toes in upward facing bow. However, when you're dropping back, it's helpful to have a little bit of that external hip rotation to get you to go back and stand back up. So that's how I like to set this up. My feet are pretty wide, toes angled out a bit, almost like I'd set my feet up for yogi squat. Now from here, I like to take the hands to the low back, scoop tailbone down and forward, and start to lean back. From here, you can either choose to walk your hands down your legs, or you could choose to bring your hands to your heart. I like to put a very big, or maybe not very big, put a decent bend in my knees. Push your hips forward, knees forward. So you have to counter your balance. As your weight goes back, some weight has to go forward, otherwise you're just gonna fall back. So your knees and your hips are pushing forward as your head and torso is dropping back. I want you to be able to see the ground behind you first. From here, you'll go ahead and extend your arms. Slow, slow, slow. Fingers to the ground first. So it's really important that you have that foundation for upward facing bow. It is a lot of flexion at the wrist joint. So if you already struggle with just doing upward facing bow from the ground, again, I would not recommend starting to learn drop backs just yet. Now, once you're in Urdhva Dhanurasana, you can wiggle your feet in. You could even lower yourself all the way down. And you'll likely notice that your stance is a bit shorter because you were coming from upwards, and the further you go back, the more chance you have of hitting your head on the ground. So you usually end in a pretty deep back bend when you drop back from standing. So what I would do if I don't have someone here to spot me, I would make sure I have a lot of space out in front of me and honestly just space around me. Again, I would really recommend having someone to spot you. And if you do have someone to spot you, they would stand in front of you. Their feet would be in between your feet and they would be facing you. So I'm gonna get into upward facing bow, but I'm gonna take my feet wider. So the same setup that I had for that drop back. So my feet are really wide. Now, I wanna walk my hands back closer to my feet. The shorter the distance, the easier it's gonna be to stand up. Now here, I wanna take a few rocks. So I'm gonna push my weight backwards, like my chest is going through my arms, and then forwards, like my butt's going towards my heels. So I'm just shifting my weight forwards and backwards. I'm getting a little bit of momentum so that when I want, I can really squeeze my belly, my hip flexors, and it's almost like I'm trying to fling my weight forward. So if you'd like to watch, we'll go, let's say 3, 2, and 1. And I take a little step or two because like I said, I just learned how, or I just kind of perfected how to do this. So it's definitely by no means perfect, but I can actually get it every time that I want to without being scared of doing it. Now, one thing another teacher recommended, my teacher recommended to me was to, again, kind of do this like you're gonna go to upward facing bow, but starting with your knees on the ground like camel pose. So same idea with the drop back, starting your hands at heart center, starting on your knees, you're gonna lower back, drop your head back, and then lean back, maybe try to touch your hands to the ground. And then you're really gonna use your hip flexors to push yourself back up, maybe into a cat pose. So doing the same thing on your knees. This way you have less opportunity to kind of wobble and fall out of it or like fall on your head. You're likely just gonna get kind of stuck in like a camel shape. So doing the same thing on the knees, drop back and a stand up. Again, that looks like this. Hands at the heart, tailbone scooping forward, hips going forward as I lean back. Tap hands, lift chest. So the lift up is a lot of engagement through the quadriceps and the hip flexors as I have to kind of shorten the front of my body to bring myself towards more of a forward bend motion. So anytime we do a back bend, we're shortening the back side, lengthening the front side. But if I want to come out of that, I'm trying to engage or shorten the front side and lengthen the back side to simulate a forward bend motion. Now, one of the other steps that I was taught when on this journey was if I was starting in upward facing bow, I could actually take it forward myself onto my knees if I didn't have a teacher there with me. This I still found a little bit scary, if I'm being honest. So if I'm on my back, again, my feet are kind of wide. So I'm gonna try to stand up, but instead of standing up, I'm gonna take it to my knees. So again, I want that nice short stance. I'm gonna rock a few times for momentum. 3, 2, and 1, knees down, going forward. It's definitely less scary than standing all the way up, and it uses the same movement and same muscles in your body. So that could also be a good step, especially if you don't have someone there to spot you, because if your spotter isn't familiar with yoga or what you're trying to do, they might not know when to catch you or where your weight is distributed. So I wouldn't just recommend like grabbing your partner and saying, hey, can you spot me? Because they might not know what to do. So this would be another yoga teacher or another student who's working on this and knows the mechanism of the pose. Otherwise, maybe start with that knees down variation. You're still in upward facing bow and then you're taking it forward onto your knees. That way, if you fall, your knees are already on the ground and you can kind of just use your arms to support you. To me, again, I think the drop back feels a little bit more controlled. The stand up feels a little bit more chaotic, but everyone's a little bit different. I hope this tutorial helped you. If you have any other tips or tricks for standing up and dropping back into Urdhva Dhanurasana, please let us know in the comments below. Maybe that will also help me perfect my drop back as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you back next week.